Welcome back to the Disrupt Education Podcast. Alli Privitt, jumping out of planes. What's going on? I just said
Uh,
jumping out of
I
planes.
yeah, right. That was definitely this past weekend, despite the weather challenges of it. But it so we're in our summer series of crushing it, and a lot of people actually the summer in the upper Midwest is when people are setting a goal to get their license, skydiving license, and they have to go through that process. And so I actually got to work with a few students this past weekend that are
Nice.
kind of starting or restarting their journey. And it's really, really interesting to have gone through the experience of being a skydiving student to then being in the sport and now on the instructing side.
Hmm.
And what I'm finding is that a lot of people have this goal and dream of being a licensed skydiver, but they don't have the steps in place, or kind of they've created this big goal for themselves, and a scary goal because it combines all of this fear and everything you have to overcome. But it's very interesting to watch people's eyes go through all of the emotions in
Yeah.
real time. And so it'll be really interesting as we kind of round out this summer series of how many people actually finish their goal. They've said verbally, oh, I'm going to be a licensed skydiver by the end of the summer. And it'll be interesting to check in when we finish this series of how many of those actually did it.
Yeah.
So
Love that.
that's what, yeah.
Well, that's actually the funny thing is I met our guest today at a Naperville Chamber of Commerce presentation, basically around getting what you're worth, and she'll talk about that. And then I suggested it to Alli, and Alli was on her podcast. So I'm like, how did this happen? But we want to welcome the awesome Nikki Green to the podcast. Hi, Nikki. How you doing?
Hi, everybody. Great to see you guys today.
Awesome. So let's obviously that's a crazy small world. And I've met you in person, and I actually haven't met Alli in person yet. I'm sure there's going to be some big unveiling thing there. But can you give people a little bit the 1 minute about Nikki Green? Who is Nikki Green, and what is this awesome book, and how can she help?
Sounds like we need a road trip, Peter. We got to get
Yes,
going.
definitely.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Green, and I am a life and business resiliency expert. So I help people adapt to change and big milestones within their life and tackle big challenges. But I've spent the last 20 years working in Silicon Valley, mostly in the areas of finance, pricing strategy, and go to market. So I do a lot of things. I set big goals and I keep crushing them summer after summer, week after week, month after month.
Resiliency, Alli, I'm going to let you take away with that in education and learning in general, no matter who you are.
Exactly. So when we were dreaming up this summer series and everything, we're like, okay, we need somebody with a mindset background. And like Peter kind of alluded to, I've met you through social media. I don't even know exactly how how our roads crisscross, but they did. I ended up, talking about a resiliency and whatnot around your book when you were launching it, the Chameleon Mindset. And anyway, as I kind of started with the podcast, sharing that story about skydiving students and having big goals, right? Like for you, you work with people who are have big goals for themselves. And I think I just want to open up for our listeners is you know, for you and what you see is what are some common roadblocks maybe that and just the mindset that maybe you even have to get to in order to really have enough space to tackle goals. Like what would you say to the people you've worked with and the listeners here around that?
Yeah, and it's been lots of different things throughout, my life and my career. And I always just, I would sit down, even as a little kid, and I would write New Year's resolutions. I would set goals for myself. And maybe they were goals for my schoolwork and how I wanted to do. They were also sports goals for me. I'm all of 5'3", but I really wanted to be like on the varsity volleyball team in high school. And I ran track and I wanted to hit certain speed goals, just all these things that I, from a very young age, was really good at goal setting. And so I started reading all these mindset books. And so that's what ended up getting me to write my book, Chameleon Mindset, is really talking about that. How is it that we set goals, but not just set them? How do we actually achieve them? How do we get them off of the paper and into every facet of our daily lives? Because people were always telling me, oh, well, it's amazing how much you've done. And I was like, I could do more. Like, for me, there was always the next level, and there still is to this day. And so I just love that conversation of, well, how do we start just whatever the goal may be, personal, professional, relationships, sports, how do we make bigger goals and how do we make them reality for us every single day?
This needs to be a class, I'm telling you right now. And actually kind of it is because of the way that you help people, and we'll get to that a little bit later. One of the things that I see as a secondary educator, and it's also probably bleeding into post-secondary and definitely into people's lives, is, they say the things that they want to be. Like I've known like a student in high school, like I want to be a lawyer, but definitely not even close to the track of actually becoming a lawyer. They're just kind of speaking these things out, and I kind of call them mindless goals. Um, how like how did you get to setting goals? Like, I want to go back into your childhood. Like, did it just come easy to you, or was there one goal that you set back in the day and you're like, oh wait, I actually attained this because I did these steps? Can you kind of unpack that? Because I think there's a lot of educators here like, how do I get this kid who wants to be a lawyer to really understand? I don't want to say you can't be a lawyer, but to give them the right, kind of motivation, equipment, mindset, the chameleon mindset, to get them going.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people, they set goals like Instagram goals. They set goals of what they see other people achieving. And that's kind of how
Mm.
we start. We're like, oh, that's possible. And they attach it to something, but it's always like this external factor. And when I made goals, it was always things I wanted to do. And a lot of times they were goals people told me were crazy. Like from the very time I uttered them, they were like, nah, that's not going to happen. And that just fired me up. When I was in school, I loved school. I went to 9 different schools in the first 12 years of my life. I was in a system of constant change. And I knew I had to be the one to motivate myself.
Mm.
And the problem is, I was also really bored. I would be like reading a book, I'd be doing my calculus in French. Like I had to have lots of layers of things
That's
happening.
horrifying right there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but it was like, okay, but what's actually intrinsically driving me to do this? Like to get good grades, your parents or somebody is kind of influencing you to do that. People need to find that intrinsic goal that they're really truly motivated to do, and they have to emotionally tie themselves to it in a way, because if you don't do that emotional tie, it still becomes that surface goal that you're never really going to get to. It's like, okay, you get that goal and then what? How am I going to be preparing myself to do the work to get to that goal, knowing it's going to be hard and it may be a long path? And that's really the mindset we've got to work on with folks. Is it's not the end state. You need to be enjoying the journey and making sure that every step of the way you feel motivated and you're making your own personal milestones that you're happy that you're getting there, right?
Instagram goals, Alli.
How
Wow,
does
that's killer. I like that.
I know. I mean, like that's totally the new age goal setting is just like, oh, I want what is on my screen, but you're not really looking at yourself like actually physically like what you want. And with your work, with mindset work, resiliency work, I'm sure you have clients and whatnot that just they knock it out of the park and they're coachable, they're they're doing the things, right? And then you have others that there's a range, like in education, you get the general public. And so not everyone, comes in with these kind of mindset things. So what's like a starting position, that you can encourage someone like, maybe they don't have the intrinsic wherewithal. They're too externally focused. What's like a good grounding for people to kind of start this work? Because ultimately, if you want to have a relentless mindset, you want to crush goals, I think there has to be some kind of grounding work. And to see if like, are you even ready for this? So
Hmm.
what would you say to someone who's like, yeah, I really want to crush it, but like what's like the check-in that they should think about?
Yeah, well, one of my first businesses had to do with my love of endurance sports. And so I coached athletes how to run marathons and do triathlons. And those are really difficult competitions, and you have to have a plan. And I think that's, again, where most people struggle in the rest of their goals is there's no plan. It's just like A to Z. And how do I break that apart into smaller goals? Well, when you're running a marathon, it's ultimately 26 miles, right? Like you don't make up how long it is. That's how long it is. So I know every week I've got to run another mile further. I start at 1 mile, then two, then three. But one of the things it also teaches us is something called periodization, which is also the step back. And so it's not like 4, 5, 6, I run 26 weeks straight and all of a sudden I can run 26 miles. It's also learning to take a break, celebrate our accomplishments, and then, jump back in and go harder. And this is what we have to do with our own goals as well. And so teaching people that it's not just about that final degree at the end of the year. It's about what am I doing each month, each quarter to celebrate, passing a test, really loving what I do, and having a growth mindset where you're constantly learning. You're not just waiting for someone to tell you what you're supposed to know about this thing. That's how you fall in love with it. Because if you're just waiting for someone to tell you you like it, it's probably not going to come together. So
That's interesting, the endurance sports. I have known professors in post-secondary who teach, and you are a serial entrepreneur, but who teach entrepreneurship through running a marathon, like actually running a marathon. I don't know. That's brilliant. And I think that you're spot on there. Like, it's not 0 to 26 miles, right? It's those steps and different things like that. Um, Man, how do you break the cycle? Let's just say you have a couple of teens in front of you, and I'm going to kind of sneak in the disrupt education question here, but like, how do you like start a teen who's like, I want to do this, and they show you their phone, and they're like, maybe it's a Bugatti, right? Because I get a lot of guys who like cars. They're like, I want to get that. Or maybe they want to do, I don't know, something like travel or whatever all over the world. Like how do you, where do you start? Let's just say it's one kid. I know I'm just phrasing this for educators in high school and middle school, so they can get some crushing material here for the summertime.
I love
Ha.
this because the travel one and the car one, it does come up a lot. When I
Hmm.
help people like make vision boards and we talk about what they want to get.
Hmm.
The car thing, I've never been a big car person. Like I love riding my bike. I
Hmm.
used to take public transportation all the time, but that's cool. You want a car. So let's talk about what does that mean? Not just how much does it cost, how much does it cost to keep that car, right? Insurance, gas, all those things. And then you have to figure out, okay, what are you going to do to go get that? And that's really that breaking it down as to not only do I need to afford that one-time payment to go get that car, I need to be able to sustain an amount of income that's going to be able so I can keep that car and it doesn't get repossessed and it's actually running and I can drive it all the time. The same thing with travel. People are like, oh, I want to travel, and I would just want to be able to work from anywhere. Trust me, as a person who's worked from anywhere, no, you do not. You want to work when you are in a hotel room and it's raining outside and there's no place else to go. When it is beautiful and you are next to a beach and you have an opportunity to go have fun with your friends or your family, you want to be going to do that. And so it's really clarifying what that goal really means and breaking it into it. I say my travel goal is I want to go everywhere. I want to go to every country. I want to learn every language, and I want to be able to better communicate and learn from others. That's a real travel goal, right? It's not just about like hanging out and working on my tan.
Yeah.
So the car, these things, you have to really get into a little bit deeper level with folks and let them think through it. Just give them the questions and let them free form, figure it out on their own and do the research. The beauty of Google and everything now, you can find pretty much all the answers.
Right. I got to follow up with one, how, like you said, vision boards, and I love them. And some kids will take them seriously and then some don't. How do you read a client who like creates a vision board and they're just kind of, joking around versus a serious vision board? Because I'm sure you've seen it with anybody, not just youth.
Yeah. Well, I always kind of make an example of it. It's like it's got the fancy car, it's got the beautiful house, you're vacationing on a beach. Like it always has sort of that Instagram feel
Hmm.
to it. And then I just start asking those questions. Well, who's going to clean that house? It's great when you're at home right now and mom and dad are taking care of everything. But as an adult, you have these other responsibilities. So unless you want to live in only one room of that, you have to, really have a quality of what's going to happen there. And if you're also out traveling at the same time, then why do you have this big house? Those goals don't go together. And so it's about making a cohesive picture of what your life really looks like. Are you driving around to go explore to these places you want to travel to? Or is that car parked in your garage because you love the house so much? These things are in conflict of what you're telling me that you want. And so really getting them to see past that veneer and like taking a little bit deeper look at themselves, because that's most people are really afraid to do that no matter what age we are and
Yeah.
say, is this something I actually want? Or am I just doing that like I'm jealous of the neighbor kind of thing?
Love that. Adults are just like kids, Alli.
They really are. Just a little, they got grayer hair, I suppose. So, okay, in education, I know that a lot of educators in particular, they have these goals, and sometimes the goals are they can they can feel like they're whether they kind of crush that goal or not is dependent on like the success of their students, however they want to, define that. But how can you, like how would you encourage educators and those in the education space, even in business, right? This applies everywhere, but it's like, how do you, remove whatever marker of success to like, you're going to do this goal and you're not going to necessarily care about the things you can't control, right? Like there are certain, like, you can't control if the kids show up having had breakfast and well rested for the test, right? But like you really want your kids to be successful in the class and show that they've learned something, or like in business is like you want your clients to complete their life goals and their mindset goals. But like you as the business owner, like how do you like really your own experience, Nikki, in business, because this just relates back to schools. It's like, how do you remove yourself from the outcome of like your clients or your business to like go all in on your goals, whatever they are, and not get derailed by the external factors that will potentially make you feel like you didn't complete your goals.
Yeah, it's really tough, especially when you are so passionate about what you're trying to achieve. Those setbacks can be really crushing, again, if you're tying your success to the wrong things. Now, my business depends on me having clients. It depends on those clients doing the work and continuing to pay me to do the work, right? For my business to be successful. Same thing with teachers. If the kids don't show up or they show up unprepared, then we're both going to struggle. And again, I kind of make a relationship back to this marathon training and stuff, because what I always want is that the training is harder than race day. That should be the point. So what you're going through every week throughout the months, the training should be harder. You should have days where stuff just does not go your way. You're not well nutritioned. You aren't well slept. Things happen that you don't plan. You miss the bus. Any number of things are going to happen. You just don't want to have that happen when the real thing that matters happens. And so take those days, those good days and the bad days, just as a part of the journey. Know that they're going to happen. Take that as an acceptance and not a reflection, and still work towards that goal, because every day we have a chance to keep going after that goal again, regardless of those hardships. I've had tough runs. I've had blistered feet. I've thrown up while I was swimming. I crashed my bike. I still had 6 more miles to go. So, and I'm sure, Alli, you with all of your adventures, you've had lots of mishaps too. And you just need to make sure that you take those as a learning lesson and just go through no matter what's happening.
And she's still here. She hasn't had a terrible mishap. That's
keep her safe.
I gotta say it. I mean,
sport I do partake in is not necessarily the safest sport out there.
Right. I mean, I was always terrified, actually more terrified of breaking my ankle when I jumped out of the plane. Seriously, it's weird, but when you hit the ground. But that's interesting though, because I think that failure is a lesson, and it's so many times, right? So a lot of teachers, like Alli, you were saying, they're into the summer. They may have had 1 or 2 classes that were just like, oh my gosh, this class did not. It happens a lot. It's like we put a lot on our shoulders as educators, and it's interesting because one of the things that I do at the end of a school year is just ask questions to the students. What went well? What didn't go well? And then you get into the summertime and you have all this time to start planning something new for a class, right? Or for a business or what have you. I want to kind of shift the conversation into kind of the reflection piece, right? Because I think as educators, we have to reflect constantly. If we don't reflect, we'll just constantly keep trying to hit the same wall and do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's insanity. How important is it for people to know, and this kind of goes into what I saw at the Chamber of Commerce, their skill sets and like who they are, what are they really good at, and where can they bring if you will, into a classroom, into a business? Like, how important is that, and how do people find those? What are some hints that you have to have people kind of self-reflect and find, okay, this is what I'm good at, maybe this isn't where I need to go, this isn't my lane?
And it's changing so much. So much of the tactical day-to-day that we used to learn and do, that was a bigger part of our career before. Now, what careers are morphing into is the need to be able to do more creative problem solving. And so I work my clients through something called creative adaptability. And so this is really combining different aspects of yourself and your talents that you may think aren't related. And this is because things aren't as linear as they used to be. We have to come up with more creative solutions and be more inventive. And before, it was very much like, here's the book, here's the test, you just go study chapter 5 and that's what it's going to be on. Now it's going to be like, it's on something in the library. You have 5 minutes to go find it, study it, learn it, and be an expert. And that's not possible. So we have to make these intuitive leaps now in order to really grow our careers. And so with creative adaptability, there's the cognitive, behavioral, why didn't I already forget the other one?
It's all right.
And emotional. So you put all these things together, and sometimes we say, oh, don't have an emotional response to things, but your emotional response can also be the flip side. It can also make you very passionate about and stubborn and really dedicated to making things happen. Behavioral wise, like maybe you are really obsessive about doing things, and instead of like, I know I should be doing something else. So really, I think we need to stop thinking like we're going to be one thing and we're going to do things one way. The more we can allow people that creative space to be able to explore, we're going to come up with some amazing new things that we never thought were possible. In 5 years, careers are going to look totally different than they look like today.
Including the teaching career, right, Alli?
I know. That's a It's interesting when I think about the work that you do and this chameleon mindset. A picture that comes to my mind is it's very bright, it's very colorful, it's very passionate, like all the work that you do. If you don't like Nikki's branding is very like bright and bold and beautiful. It is. And but I I sometimes feel like education can be a bit gray, right? And like what we're trying to encourage people to do this summer is to step on the gas pedal and like go full color, like, pursue your passions, go outside of the box and whatnot. Because ambivalence and like indifference is really like a killer for innovation and disruption and trying to push the envelope forward. And probably the people we're speaking to, have that color, but they just need to make it like brighter and bolder. I'm gonna guess that not a lot of indifferent people are listening to the podcast. However, like how do you kind of like kick it up a gear? Because right, like that passion, like you seem to just embody it and like come up with these crazy goals, and that's what like attracts people to you, right? But like if you're not there yet, like how can you kind of like ramp it up? It's yes, this is reflection part, but like the action piece, especially in education, like how can you kind of get out of this hemming and hawing, potentially indifferent, and just go?
Yeah, just jump out the plane and
Yep.
go make it happen.
That's
But
what
it is
Alli
important.
says when people are ready to jump. Just go. No.
Just go, exactly. Just go. And it that comes with time. There was a long part of my youth where I was very afraid. That much change. It was hard. There was always a lot of family stuff going on behind the scenes, and I had to really insulate myself. So I didn't actually let people in a lot, to be truthful. And so I was always the new kid, but it also allowed me to always reinvent myself because there was no history. There was no one
Mm.
that knew, whatever mishaps might have happened in the past, good or bad, right? And so it was a little bit freeing, but not having that longevity also doesn't give you that support to lean on. And so I think that's been the biggest help as I build this new business, which does require me to be so creative all the time, to have a support network that will encourage me to do that push. And so if you are interested in doing something, but maybe you're scared to start, you need to make connections in that area, and they will show you the way. You find that mentor. That's the way that you aren't alone. You're not trying to do this all by yourself. You need to make those connections. Even my first marathon, I didn't just go, man, I woke up today, I feel like learning to run longer. No, I had a business mentor who also, happened to do endurance sports. And so gradually I got into it. And so don't think you have to bite off the final thing again. So find that community, start to just be a part of it, make sure it continues to resonate with you, and start taking those steps towards doing whatever, or just learning about what you might be interested in doing. So.
I feel like that network is that first step. I mean, that really is. It's interesting. I like the rebranding piece and how, you just openly just said, look, I'm changing a little bit of the business and things like that. I have that conversation with a lot of the seniors in high school about like when they leave, they get to start over, right? Whether they're going to workforce, or they go into college, they go into the trades, the military, whatever, like, not all their friends are going to be around them and they get to rebrand themselves. And then also, like for educators, most of us, I mean, there are some schools that are year round and things like that, but there are breaks in there. So most of us have like a pretty large, substantial break in the summertime. And we have that area to where we can kind of rebrand anything. Like we can rebrand, not necessarily ourselves, but I like to rebrand I mean, I can't tell you how many times I rebranded entrepreneurship, the class, and I just keep working on it and those types of things. Um, and this is the time to talk. This is why you're here, Nikki. Like we're expanding our network for our listeners, but you can also reach out and do those things, and we'll get into those contacts a little bit later. After somebody starts to build that network and they're ready to run that marathon, what do you think is that next step? Because that's why I really want to give our listeners, our students, that, okay, and I love that. It's such a hard thing for some people to actually reach out into a network. That could be a whole nother conversation. But once they do that, let's say they get 4 or 5 people around them, what's usually like the thought process that you would suggest in general? I mean, I know there's individual stories and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can possibly think of. Enjoy being a beginner at something. So often we get sort of to this like expert level, but you eventually, maybe by the time we're old and gray, we can be experts at everything, but enjoy being a beginner. It's actually really fun. My little one is 7, and just watching him explore the world and ask questions, and there's no dumb question. It's always just like, I don't know, this random thing came in my head and I want to know how it works. Why do the cicadas die? Why don't they come every year? Like, whatever's happening literally in the moment. And allow yourself that freedom. So often we get in this point where I'm even just the questions, I'm afraid to look dumb. I'm afraid to look unknowledgeable or ask something that's off topic. It's okay. That's exactly the time to do it. So give yourself that freedom in that beginning phase, because then when you get in for it, it is going to get a little bit harder to keep asking kind of beginner. I was like, why didn't you ask that like 4 months ago, man? Like you should. But, give yourself that space. I think it's important because, we all of a sudden we're super mature and we can do all these things so cool. But, I think in the beginning, just have fun, enjoy it, and learn as much as you can from the people around you.
So tell us about, like just kind of getting into your work and whatnot. But okay, right. We're trying to encourage people to go and crush it this summer. So what are some things you have done just to kind of, maybe encourage people in business, in life? Besides, I mean, we've already learned you do endurance sports or did and you obviously are an entrepreneur, but like what are some crazy goals you've set for yourself and you've gone and crushed them, as specific as you want to be, but just to kind of showcase like this is why we brought Nikki on the podcast, to be like, okay, one, you need the right mindset, but then, look, your goals don't have to stop just because, you have a job or you finish school. Like you can continually, I like this, reinvent yourself. You can continually set goals. You can continually crush it. And so what are you kind of working on right now? And goals either you've just completed or in the middle of, you haven't completed yet, etc.
Yeah, I love the beauty of this because it feeds on itself. So December 2022, I was finishing up Chameleon Mindset. We were getting ready to launch. And I'm in a bunch of different kind of networking circles and masterminds, which are incredibly helpful for pushing you, and helping you solve problems. And one of the wonderful speakers in there, she said, I'm looking to get on 100 podcasts. And so if you could help me, with any referrals or whatever, that'd be cool. And I went, 100 podcasts? That feels crazy. Who could get on 100 podcasts? And then I started thinking, I was like, but I have a podcast and I go to podcast conferences and I had guests on my show that have also podcasts. And as soon as I started doing the math, I was like, I can be on 100 podcasts. And then I said, I could be on 100 podcasts before my book launches. So in the first 60 days of the year, I managed to get on 100 podcasts.
Wow.
And what did that allow me to do? It allowed me to then have enough material that pretty much all year round, somebody somewhere was talking about my book. And it cost me nothing other than the time to get on there, and talk about the book and send people free copies. And what that's led to this year in 2024 is that Now I'm going to be on 200 stages between lives, podcasts, and virtual summits and in-person conferences, because all of those people then gave me referrals to the next thing I wanted to do. And so when you think that one goal is like, oh my gosh, that's the hardest thing I'm ever going to do, it's going to make it easier for you to do the next thing and the next thing, because those things cascade together. And so that's just one example of recently something for my business that I didn't expect. It wasn't fully planned, and I just sort of jumped full in it, and it's cascading to even great things this year too.
100 podcasts in 60, do you say 60 days? That's
60 days.
amazing. But to your point though, is really like just setting, you set it. And let's just say, and this is what I love telling students, let's just say you say you're going to do this 100 times in the first 2 months. And then it just goes away and you make 60, right? What, I mean, that's going to work, right? I mean, that's how people level up and do some different things, right?
There's no downside. Unlike the marathon, there is no set number. You made up the number, right? And so you can just go ahead and do as best you can. And then you figure out what were the obstacles. People were, out too far, for their scheduling. They were already busy. You'll find out what kind of those constraints are. So when you set the goal for the next time, you're like, oh, okay, well, here's the parameters I didn't know at the time, and I can consider and do it better. So, it's never really a loss. It's always a learning lesson. And then you already got 60, which you never had planned to do anyway. So
Right.
You're already on the upside.
No, I love that. I love that. So Alli has just left. She's already setting goals. So she
Good.
just ran.
Rocket. Let's go.
And she's like, forget about it. But before we go, 3 things you want educational listeners to know. I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, ready, go. I mean, the future is now, guys, with AI and so much technology coming, and having spent most of my career in Silicon Valley, the future is now. So educate yourself, help and educate your students, and really push the limits of what you're allowing kids to do. And I think a part of that is, number 2 is always real life experience. I think one of the biggest challenges I had is, no matter how much I love school, when I got to work, it didn't line up. And I still struggled with really being successful in the beginning, because school and work were very different things. So the more we can give kids immersive experiences to really try different careers, I think that is really encouraging. And I think number 3 for sure, especially after the last few years, is give yourself a break. Give yourself a break. Give the kids a break. Not that we're still not setting these big goals and crushing them, but sometimes those big goals really require us to make sure to take care of ourselves. And so many of us keep forgetting that. So it's important that our teachers, our educators take care of ourselves, because they're taking care of so many of our kids. If you guys aren't happy, healthy, and doing your best work, then the rest of us are going to struggle too.
Love it. Welcome back, Alli. We thought you just ran to your goal. You're like, let's go.
No, the internet. It's not storming here, but sometimes, internets just decide they don't want to work.
It's all good. That's why, you know what? It's like we're enjoying being beginning podcasters again, right, Nikki? So Alli, she gave us 3 things, and you're just gonna have to wait until the podcast comes out to hear them. But wanted to we shared Nikki's contact information. Alli, we're gonna final thought this. So you come right back on, looks like digital there. You're on your phone. Let's go. What are some final thoughts here on the conversation, Alli?
I think for just kind of tying it back to where we started with, I'm thinking about the students that are starting like a really big goal with trying to get like the skydiving license, or teachers who are like, I am going to, I'm taking on a new class or a new position, or like you really are taking on something that is like eating an elephant, and it's going to require, like, you don't go skydiving by yourself. There's a community. You like, you don't teach on an island. You don't, like, the community and everything is so integrated. And we have heard from Robert Peppo and Cindy Midget about like the importance of mentorship and community and relationships. And I think that leaning into that this summer in order to crush your goals and relying on other people to kind of also hold you accountable, you know, like you showing up for what you say you're going to do is a huge part of crushing your goals. Is it's like it's taking it off of Instagram, right? Which
Yeah.
that's no more Instagram goals. Like show up in whatever space you need to physically be in order to crush those goals.
Love that. Love that. And I, just loving just enjoying being a beginner. That's a great line, Nikki. So you've got some things coming up, obviously in Chicago here in the Midwest, August 23rd to the 25th. You have some things going on, but you do it worldwide. How can people connect with you and find out more, and then likely they'll get involved some of these events? I mean, I got 1 hour with her, Alli, and it was amazing. And I actually got the job that she was teaching about. So good stuff. But yeah, how can people connect with you, Nikki?
Yeah, you guys can catch me on my personal site at the nikkigreen360.com. There you can watch me dance on TikTok. You can listen to my podcast. You can catch any of my books. And there is an entire section of events. Many of them are free and you can hear me speak, but also jump into some of our fun stuff like happy hours and things like that. We build community. It's not just about learning. It's about making that real lifetime connection. So I'd happy to hear from you guys and see how I can help you guys crush your goals.
100%. We will put all that information up in the notes of this podcast. And that's exactly why we're here, Disrupting Education, building the community of people who are, look, we're everything's changing. We can continue to put these big goals out there and really take the steps to make them happen. So I think the first thing everybody needs to do is just talk about this podcast and possibly say, hey, you know what? Here's this awesome Disrupt Education podcast. And we'd love to hear from you. So don't be a stranger. Hit us up on disrupteducation.co or Alli Privitt or Peter Hostrawser on LinkedIn. We're here for you as well. Thank you for Nikki Green and Alli Privitt. I'm Peter Hostrawser. We'll talk to you next time on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrawser or Alli Privitt.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.